group symbol, which is available right now here for a modest price.
Sure.
It was published as a chapbook in 2013 by the Gorilla Press.
Yay!
She's currently at work on a short novel, Ball Bound, which won the 2013 Clark Gross Novel Award. Amy,
hilarious!
Guys.
And the tide goes out and he has to wait the 6 hours or whatever to get back into the shore. So this is a poem about that. So it starts with, many of the real scenes in early California life exceed in strangeness and interest any of the mere products of the brain of the novelist. That's from Ulysses S. Grant's personal memoirs. Okay. The boat took him out to wherever he wanted. He was drunk and the water smooth, the prow cutting like no thought could manage. So more of that, and the horizon. Paddled to the end, merely the middle, and for most, the edge, from the other way. Grant sat in Humboldt Bay and watched what? Rising light on the water, his bent, refracted fingers in the water's fertile smell, vomit sinking in clouds, the peace of an empty stomach. The mud had him, deep and gooey and sun-warmed. With the tug of the moon, the tide pulled away. Boats, perfectly reliable, as flies woke him again. Was it Sunday or Monday? Was he drunk or sober? Grant wondered if he'd pissed himself as well as stranded himself. And when the tide approached, a soft hand sliding beneath his ass, he drew armfuls of water onto himself into the boat. Okay, and so the next is a little excerpt, a brief excerpt from my thesis, which is a novel. And the premise of the novel is that an alien ship has been discovered in our solar system, and it's sort of ascertained that this ship at its current course and speed will be within Earth space. It's headed towards us within about 2 years from the time it's discovered. And in those 2 years, there's a certain group of families that this novel follows, and they decide to leave their populated cities on the west coast of the United States and go to Humboldt County. It's just a couple of cabins out there that one of the family members owns. So the first part is about this teenage girl, Beth, and she is sort of discovering what it's like to be out in Humboldt County and to live near a creek with these huge boulders. And if you've ever been to Humboldt County, you know it's sort of this incredible natural place. And then the final section that I'll read is from the voice of the alien, who is sort of a narrator in the novel also. Okay. Beth held the river-wet stone in her fingers, loose, suspended lightly over the stone below it. She was attempting a column of them, but had little intuition for aligning the rock's center of gravity. She'd seen impossible alignments before on a trip to a rocky Cape Cod shore, and they'd stuck with her. The balance of it seemed sacred, and the rocks were all she had. She knew she was clumsy and feverish. She had cuts and burns on her hands, bruises on her shins and thick feet, all from acting too fast. Her skin seemed to have thickened since she arrived into a shell. She would go down to the creek when she felt encased by it and be as an ogre in the delicate light that filtered through the trees of her sanctuary. Then Beth would exfoliate herself with the stones in the creek bed. Stripped naked, or nearly, she would choose a smooth stone and wash the thin slime of silt from it with her fingers, revealing its granularity. Then she would rub it up and back the length of her arms, torso, and legs while standing on two boulders. A couple steps into the creek, and then a rushing dip up to her neck in the cold, 3-foot-deep pool that collected by the bluff on the far side, amidst the exposed tree roots. She stepped out of the creek carefully to avoid disturbing the silt around her legs. Each step had its significance, which she articulated with the sincere and quiet obligation of a religious person. First, nakedness, then the stone chosen and removed, the body examined and addressed, ideally quickly. The feet and hands are clean, balance over to the pool, rinse, balance back to the warm rock, sit on the warm rock. Every day or so, Beth would go and handle the rocks of the creek. She would sit with memories of people from her past, friends she grew up with, friends she'd met most recently in Rochester, Washington. She considered each of her friends and decided that she hadn't been honest with any of them. Friendship was impossible, she thought. She only ever felt it as a series of comings and goings. Maybe Jed, her twin, was her only true friend. She wasn't sure she was ever totally honest with anyone. These thoughts disturbed her. The rocks became more important, their solidity more wholesome. After she had done away with friends, she began to look onto the plants, the living growth. She would talk to her mother as if her mother were in the moss on the boulders, her mother as flaky lichen, that wet clinging green, or the ivy that hung from the rafters of the arching laurels. She spoke to her mother in strained, muted speech, entranced by her own emotion, trying to be entranced. She gathered long strands of ivy which hung down from the trees and laid it in a circle on the ground and across the stream. This circle was to define the sanctuary's boundaries. It comforted Beth to be inside a space of her own creation. It pleased her for a time. Then, upon considering the flow of the water and its cosmic importance to the sanctuary and the disturbance of green, air-nourished ivy laid in the water to sway and eventually bloat and rot, she decided it was contradictory, a mistake, and so she collected the strands back up, shaking her head in disappointment, coiling it up like an extension cord and tossing it up and over the bluff, where it caught on a branch and splayed on the ground to decompose. When it was warm, she would stay naked and seek places where she could lay back and rest in a patch of light. Sometimes she stretched and touched herself, deeply taken by the wind across her skin, the noise of the pouring water. When she came, she felt guilty but couldn't answer to why. The rock beneath her was poking and jabbing her back. The substance on her hand unlike anything. There was always in her a shame despite her devotion to the automatic, to the moment, a disbelief which tethered her to the cabins. She was always careful to position herself where no one would see her. The thought of interruption grounded her, scared her into returning to the house, only mostly finished with her ablutions and prayers. And then this is the voice of the alien who's traveling through our solar system, looking at this group of families and sort of narrating their story. That's the premise. The alien. How I wish I could travel through time. I sometimes look out at the blackness of space-time and think, I am on the brink of understanding you. Why do I address space as you? I do not know who you is. Their language is entering me. In these moments, I begin to believe that I can see every event, the moment of every particle which has passed through the space my body occupies. Like when she bathes, surrounded in liquid, or when they are contained in the womb. Gold forms in a supernova. Ice evaporates from a meteor, its smallest bacterium laying open and exposed to death, the remaining particles still spinning somewhere, riding the momentum they were given by the great explosive thread of home, rock, hurtling through you, space. You are nothing. I accuse you of nothing. How I wish I could be, not on the brink of seeing, but actually sitting inside these events. Do I make any sense? As I wish I could know how the lives in front of me have braided together through time. Each one of them is so bloody complex. That's an English note. Instead, I hover over them. Just beyond me, they walk and fear and love. They are with me only where we meet, at the event horizon, which is my final destination. You can see, can you, that I've the vision of the bird, my wings still and outstretched. What force is at work on a still bird's soaring body? I accuse myself of stillness and of soaring over them. And as I draw closer, I want only to continue. It is not often that I have such unanswerable desire.